Hello and welcome to Let's Talk HR with Dr. Janine, the talk show about all things HR. We are living in a world of social media. We are able to communicate with people worldwide in a matter of seconds. According to nextweb.com, more than 2 billion people around the world use Facebook alone, not counting those who use other social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, and LinkedIn. Social media can be a fun and entertaining way to socialize with family and friends, keeping up with current events, creating and posting photos, videos, chatting with people around the world electronically. But did you know that social media, in some instances, is used by employers as a background screening assessment? That's what we're talking about today. And to help us with the discussion is David Estelle, Human Relations Manager, and Tammy Henry, Vice President of Client Success with DataFacts. Welcome to the show, the both of you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Denny. It's so great to be here with you today.
Thank you. And Tammy, we're so glad to have you.
So very blessed to be here.
All right, we're going to talk about you first, right?
Oh, no.
So, David, you have a long history in human resources and in the background screening assessment. Tell us more about your career journey.
So I'm one of those that came into HR by mistake.
By mistake.
So my wife and I, we moved to Memphis in 1990, and shortly after that, I was hired by Snelling to open a recruiting desk for the medical profession.
Wow.
So for like the next 9 years, I worked as a recruiter, senior recruiter in the medical profession, home health aides and things like that, pharmacist, and walked away from that for a while. And was hired by DataFacts about 8 years ago.
Wow.
And I was hired as an outside salesperson. You know, I was working with HR professionals across the country, selling the background screening assessments and reports and things like that. Got involved with SHRM, was just going my merry way. And, you know, one day I was like, you know, as DataFacts continues to grow, being their HR manager might be a good thing.
Yes.
But, you know, I didn't really know. And it came a time where Daphne Large, our CEO, came to me because I was on the SHRM board. And she was like, we need to hire an HR person. Who do you know that might be good in this role?
Who do you know?
Right here.
Who do you know?
And I said, well, give me 24 hours and I'll have an answer for you.
Okay.
Raised his hand.
And I raised my hand and I said, pick me. And you know Daphne well enough that
Yes.
it's not just pick me. There better be some meat and potatoes with that.
Oh, yes.
And so I followed up with some reasons why I thought that I would be successful for DataFacts in that position. A couple weeks later, she and I had a formal interview that lasted 3+ hours.
By the way, right?
By the way.
Yeah.
It just so happened that the next day, Tammy was my boss at that time.
Okay.
And it was time for my annual review. And I couldn't figure out why my annual review went from 1 hour to 2 hours on the calendar. I'm like, what have I done? But the first hour with Tammy was an additional interview, kind of radio silence for a week. And then I got the text or the email. So the alarm goes off in the morning on my phone, look at my email, and I'm like, Cheryl, I got the job.
You got the job. Isn't that a wonderful feeling?
Of course, then like the third I got the job was more of, oh my gosh, I got the job. And the funny part was, of course, there was a laid out, succession plan of leaving the client success team, moving into HR. But the reality was at 8 o'clock that morning when I walked into the office, I was then the HR manager.
Wow.
And been in that position for 2.5 years now and have loved it.
And you have done a wonderful job with it.
Well,
Absolutely. You have done a wonderful job with it. All right, Tammy, you've been in the background screening industry for a number of years.
A long
and
time.
with one of the largest, if not the largest retail employer ever. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So the majority of my career, 27 years worth, was actually with Walmart. I actually sort of grew up with Walmart. Started it as an hourly associate and worked my way up through the organization. I spent a lot of my career in HR roles. I actually at one time had regional responsibility for all of the stores here in Tennessee, as well as in Mississippi, Alabama. Did a little bit and then got tired of sort of the HR, wanted to sort of branch out and try something else. And there was a position open with their global security team working for doing the background check program for the company. So I moved over to that, and I actually ran the background check program for 9 years with Walmart. We ran on average about 1.75 million background checks a year.
Oh my goodness.
So
that is
busy.
a lot.
It's a lot of background checks. It's at times it's more than some small consumer reporting agencies run. Right?
Absolutely.
So it was crazy times, but I learned a lot.
Yes.
I learned a lot.
And you were able to bring it right to DataFax.
Absolutely.
Which is a wonderful company, I must say. I have to tell you that. About 10 or 15 years ago, in the role, leadership role that I was in with my employer, we had to hire 500 people, and we had to do it quickly. So a lot of the inner workings were manual. So I met Lisa May. And she said, I bet you we can do those backgrounds for you. I said, you think you can? She said, yeah. So I took it to my bosses. DataFax did it. We hired 500 people in that 1 year. And then the next year we did it again. And thanks to DataFax, it was great. Check them out, okay? But before we get to social media, I want to talk about this, the recruitment cycle. So in the recruitment hiring cycle, background checks are usually conducted. So what type of background checks can be assessed and which ones cannot?
You want to take it or you want me to?
I can start it and then you can finish
That works.
it. That works. A lot of times people do ask that question and are concerned that, can I step over the line? Am I asking for too much information? Am I getting too much information? And I always go back to, you do have to do, kind of an individual assessment when even if somebody does have a criminal past or things in their background, you can have that conversation with that individual and find out if it has a direct correlation to the job that they're going to be doing and whether or not you should be, you should use that or shouldn't use that. But, you can do everything from verifying social security number, job history, felonies, driving records, drug use, all kinds of things.
All sorts of things. Absolutely. Employment verifications, education verifications, all of those things.
Personal references,
licenses, right? If you have like a professional license, that type.
We do a lot of work with medical and have to make sure that the licenses are current, that they're not on a debarred list.
That's interesting.
Well, so my first attempt at a placement, back in the early 90s, I was placing a pharmacist. And I didn't know about people being on debarred list.
Right.
Everybody's good people.
Yeah.
And introduced this candidate to a hospital. And about an hour after the interview was supposed to start, the hospital called me up and they were like, do you know that he was fired from his last job for stealing drugs and using drugs illegally?
Wow.
And I was like, no, I didn't know that. But now there's, as part of a background screen, you find that information out.
Absolutely. You find that out. And like you were saying, if somebody has a criminal record, what protections do they have? We know that the Fair Credit Reporting Act is the act that governs guidelines and background guidelines. So what if what's found is not them?
Sure.
So how do we handle something like that? It's not them, right? Should they disclose on applications, which a lot of the applications have been revised now to not ask that the question about
Felonies
felonies and things and also offenses. But what is it that they should do?
Well, the Fair Credit Reporting Act goes back to the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, exactly what you said, to make sure that the information that's contained in a report is accurate and truthful. So if I, as an employer, decide not to hire somebody based on information that I'm receiving in a background screening report, then I need to provide them with a copy of that report and a means for them to then refute the information that I have. No, that's not me. No, you've got the wrong John Smith. No, that was my brother's cousin's uncle's dog's girlfriend's brother
Right.
that committed that crime. It wasn't
And
me.
it wasn't me. Yes.
My lawyer told me that was expunged from my record. I don't know how you found out about that. So there's all kinds of different scenarios, but it does give the consumer the right to challenge the report and prove that the information that's contained in it is the correct information. And if the information is incorrect, then it is the consumer reporting agency's responsibility to go out and make sure that that gets corrected.
And that's fair.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Give people a chance to
Hence,
respond.
the Fair Credit Reporting Act.
Exactly.
Right. And so the FCRA, you hear about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. People usually think about my credit score or
Exactly.
but it's not associated with background screening. So
It actually is. So I always tell HR professionals, right? You want to think about a background check, all of those screening criteria that we're doing the same as you would your credit report.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're running, criminal history, we're running the employment verifications, we're running the education verification, all of that. And just how you would typically get a copy of your credit report, you'd look through it and determine whether or not there's any inaccuracies, and you would go back to TransUnion or Experian to dispute those, those findings, right? You have those same rights that you have on your credit report, you have on a background check report.
That's good. That's good information.
It's the same exact governing body.
Yes.
For both.
Yes. And speaking of criminal backgrounds, let's just talk about it just for a minute.
Sure.
So if an employee has a criminal background, is it best, we've always been taught, it is just best for you to disclose on the front end and then just be prepared to discuss. You tell me what's happening now.
I'm gonna shake my head and tell you no.
Shake your head.
I'm gonna shake
That's
my
what
head
we're
and tell
here.
you
We're
no.
learning. Yes, go ahead.
I'm gonna tell you no. So it's interesting. So you actually have seen this sort of migration, right? It was very, very popular years ago on applications for employers to ask the questions, right? Have you ever been convicted of a felony, or have you ever been convicted of a misdemeanor or a theft or a violent crime, right? And that was standard practice. And then you saw sort of this change.
Yes.
The large change that came in 2012 when the EEOC came out with guidance that said, time out.
Right.
Right. Before you even run a background check, you shouldn't be asking those types of questions. Right. And not only that, but you should be making a conditional offer even prior to running a background check. So as HR professionals, we really had to sort of make that change in our processes to sit down and interview a candidate and really look at them from do you have the skill set for the job? Right? Do you have, are you a cultural fit for our organization? Right? And if you are, then we're going to make you the conditional offer. And that conditional offer is going to be based on you successfully then passing a background check. Right?
Yes.
And so you really sort of saw that shift. Now you had some states, right? So EEOC federally came out with that. Then you had some states that came out with even stronger things, right? So you have like the state of New York that mandates the individualized reviews. And so New York, Wisconsin, Hawaii, Pennsylvania, and other states have now come on board and said, just doing those things that the EEOC has said you need to go do, that's not enough.
Not enough.
It's not enough, right?
Yes.
And so that's where, as HR professionals, really you should be taking it a step further. So you make your conditional offer, right? You run your background check, and then you step back, and if something comes on the background check, you sit down with the candidate and go, tell me about the circumstances.
Yes.
Tell me about rehabilitation efforts. Tell me about all the things that you've done since your incarceration that now make you a productive member of society.
Absolutely.
And why should we take that chance on you,
Yes.
right? And then make your decision to bring that individual on board.
Well, and it also goes into play where, something that may have happened, a crime that may have been committed, let's say when somebody was 18.
Right.
How does that affect them when they're 28, 38, 48?
Right.
How does, a crime that was committed, a DWI or something like that, and that involved an accident that may have killed somebody. So now you've got vehicular homicide, but how does that affect somebody that's going to be an accountant?
Right.
Not
really
that's why
related.
you go back to the individual conversations and then having the conversation about what the crime was, what you've done to rehab or to be a productive member of society now.
Absolutely. That's why I'm so glad you've seen the progression of the laws to help in situations such as those. The new legislations, the things that you were talking about, making the conditional offer before even looking at your background.
Absolutely.
Right? Ban the box ordinances all over the state. So I'm so glad to know. Glad y'all are here to talk about it. Now let's get to this social media screening. Now this is something that's new. I want you all to lay it out. Tell us all the W's. What, when, where, all of those things you can do in terms of social media background screening.
I'm going to let you handle most of this, but Denise, to start this episode, you talked about Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and LinkedIn. There are hundreds, thousands,
absolutely,
of dark web type social media channels that those of us that are just kind of connecting with our high school friends don't even think about.
Know about or think about.
Absolutely. And that's why, we've seen so many companies and executives. I remember a couple years ago hearing about a football player that had a scholarship offer that was retracted because of things that he had posted on social media that, became a lightning rod for, campus uprisings.
Wow.
So, there's lots of things that you have to think about. It's not just, I love somebody or I'm going to take this, selfie of myself.
Yes.
There's a lot of more things that go into play there.
Wow.
There are. It's a very interesting area, a very interesting topic. And it's sort of funny because as a past HR professional, I know darn good and well that my college recruiters and the recruiters that were working for me at the time were out trolling people's Facebooks, right?
Yeah.
They'd find a candidate, it'd be a great candidate. You know what? I'm going to go check their Facebook page and see what they're
Check it out.
right? Check it out. And then if I saw something on their Facebook page, I was making a decision then whether or not I was going to bring them forward as a candidate, right? Instead of including it as part of that background check, that full background check assessment. Now there's tools available, right, through background screening companies that are FCRA certified. Right?
That's how you do it.
So absolutely,
That's
you want to
how
make
it's
sure
done.
that you want to make sure you're protected, right? That really will filter for you only those things that you need to see. So things that could be a brand or a reputational risk, things that could be a threat to your organization, right? Those are the things that you want to see. You don't need to be out there trolling somebody's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and going, did you know that she's pregnant? Right?
Right.
And making a decision to hire or not hire because you saw something that puts them in a protected class. Right?
Yes.
You don't need to be out there doing that, right? That's why you want to use those social media type tools. We're starting to see it more and more, right?
Absolutely.
We're starting to see the pickup, really the snowball effect of individuals using social media to make decisions because you've seen so much in the media. I mean, if you think about last year on January 6th and everything that happened in Washington, D.C., right? we had a lot of employers that called that said, we want to know what our employees are doing, right? We want to know, were our employees involved? Were they in DC at the time? What was going on? What's happening, right? And so, it becomes an important tool for the organization. It goes back to really that risk to their brand. Right.
Absolutely. That is so true. So if I'm an employer and I'm doing a social media background check, what are some of the things I do not want to see on someone's Facebook page?
There's a lot you don't want to see.
What is it that I don't want to see?
David made a comment earlier, you can't unsee what you've seen.
You cannot unsee what you've seen. So it's so important what you put out there.
Absolutely.
It's open to everybody. But
it is.
What are some of those
It
things?
absolutely is.
What are some of those
Violence towards other individuals,
Absolutely.
racial, derogatory sayings, intent, things like that. I'm sorry, I'm old school, but why would somebody post nudity or, I don't want to say semi-nudity because it's like 0.75% nudity,
Yes.
on a social media page.
You'd be surprised the things that we've seen.
Wow.
The team that actually does the social media screening within our organization sometimes has to literally shut down their computer and step away because they see things that at times are very graphic or are very disturbing, right, that we're providing back to the employer. And sometimes you just sort of have to step back and take that breath, right? And go, this isn't indicative of everybody in the United States, right?
Yes, right.
This is this one individual that's made a choice to go do something and post something or to have a business. We had one recently where it was a candidate for a high profile job within an organization, and he had been screened and he had a side job that was, it showed nudity and sex related things. And it was just, it was something that was not an appropriate avenue for someone that was going to be an executive with this organization.
I understand.
And so, it's.
Yeah, and going back, it's one thing for somebody to be showing off their gun. They might be a hunter. It's another thing to, have a whole arsenal and a video of me saying, I'm going to kill somebody.
Yes.
Yes.
Big
difference.
Big
difference.
And that's where, kind of the social media screening comes into play. Because if I'm just the college recruiter scrolling through and I see somebody with a gun, it might put a thought in my head. But, there really isn't anything wrong with having a licensed carry permit gun. But if I'm making threats with the gun or...
Yes.
It's all about the context of what's on there.
Right.
Yeah, what's
It
on
really
there.
is. What's the meaning of what they're doing? What
Yeah.
are they trying to say?
Right.
Right.
Well, let me we'll flip it now. I'm an individual. I can put whatever I want on my page.
Absolutely.
You absolutely can.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure social media assessment has the potential to be questioned. I'm an individual. I can put what I want on my page. So how do you justify using it as an assessment factor when it's really their own personal page? How do you do that? And as an HR professional, how can I tell an applicant what I saw on their social media page that could impact their successful employment with me?
Sure. So first of all, anything that you pull that's going to be part of the consumer report, part of that background check report, as long as you're doing it within the context of the FCRA, that becomes part of that consumer report.
Okay.
And so if you're going to essentially take adverse action against an individual based off of something within the consumer report, whether it's social media or a criminal act or their education, they falsified their education, right? They get a copy of that report, including the social media screening, right?
Yes.
So they see what was found, right? They actually see that, right? And they have the ability to dispute that information just like they do any other part of the consumer report, right? But I think the for HR professionals, right, I think it goes back to having that message of, is it a risk to your organization? Is it either a true risk from a threat standpoint, or is it a risk from a brand, right? Is this individual, it goes back to that, is this individual a cultural fit for our organization based off of what I see, right? And what I now know, right? Because you've made that conditional offer thinking that hey, he's the greatest guy in the world.
Yes.
But little did I know that
what he
does on the weekends, he walks around with an AK-47 threatening small children, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's
makes a difference. Right?
There's a big difference, right?
Yes.
And I'm not going to know that until, as an HR professional, I'm not going to know that until I do the screening, right? And so, it's all about making sure that you're doing it under the guises of the FCRA so that it is protected information. There is the ability to dispute that information. You're only getting the information that you should be getting, not the protected class information, not all of the other stuff that you shouldn't be getting, right? And then you make a decision based off of that.
Right.
Well, and you got to think, what happens when, and we're in Memphis, Channel 5 shows up at your company because there was just a shooting, or there was just a rape on your property, or there was, and they say, did you not know that Joe Smith had this tendency? We were looking at his Facebook page, and this is what we saw.
Yes.
Did you not know that?
Wow. Yeah. Well, you won't know unless you look at it.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's why. But again, as the company, you can't unsee what you saw, so you don't want to. And that's why you hire somebody like DataFacts to do the background screen for you, and do the social media screen for you.
Yes, absolutely. This is such good information because on both sides, why we do the social media screening, under what guidance do we do it, under what agency or entity that it's legal under, but it's a way for us to learn more about the candidates in which we're screening. So this is wonderful. Last question. What else are we going to see new in the background screening industry?
Oh, there's a lot of innovation going on right now. A lot of innovation. Background screening is more than just running a consumer report. There's a lot of things obviously going on in the drug and occupational health space.
Okay.
Obviously, with the state of the drug testing industry, going through COVID, everybody's stressed. From a lab perspective, things taking a lot longer. There's a lot of new screening, drug screening tools that are out now. There's oral swab testing that you literally can get results within 10 minutes.
Okay.
Right? Instead of sending somebody to a clinic, having them provide a urine sample, having that go to a lab and going through that whole process, right? So there's a lot of things like that. There's monitoring. Like arrest monitoring, right? You think about as an HR professional, right? I screen somebody coming in the door as a pre-hire.
Okay.
Right? But once they're on board and they've been on board with me for 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 years, what's to say during that time that they didn't go out and do something stupid?
Right.
And did I hear about it as an HR professional, right? Did they come forth and tell me? Were they honest that they got arrested?
Did
they disclose that? Yeah. Or were they hiding it, right? And hoping that they weren't going to get caught because they knew it was going to impact their job, right?
Well, and when you talk about monitoring, driver monitoring.
Oh, absolutely.
There's not too many people that would show up to work on Monday and say, oh, by the way, I got a DUI over the weekend. No, they would just show up to work on Monday and jump in your company truck and start their deliveries.
Right. Yes. Right.
Absolutely.
So those are things that you as an employer need to be aware of.
Well, you heard it here. Thank you so much, David and Tammy, for coming to talk about background screening assessments, what's new, what's to come. And you'll have to have you back so we can talk about those futuristic things. So
absolutely.
We are living in a world of social media, and I tell you, there is not a way in which we can get better unless we discuss it.
Absolutely.
So social media can be fun, as we mentioned before, in an entertaining way, but we can also utilize social media in organizations where we can find out the most about candidates before we make that hire. I tell you, you don't want to miss it. The next episode of Let's Talk HR with Dr. Dean is going to be on the 2nd and 4th Friday of each month. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I tell you what, I love this episode, love the guests, and tune in next time. And just remember, HR forever. See you next time.